looking forward to hearing you tell something about your beginnings in the field of social work. At what point did you become interested in social work? And when did you decide to get professional education? But first tell me a bit about your family background and where you received your undergraduate degree.
We don't?
Now, go ahead. You can talk now.
My background, I am a person who was born in Paris, France in 1895. My mother did not identify with France to the degree that my father decided that perhaps they should move to another community. We had a Czech friend in New York who was employed with Revillion Frères, which was the same firm my father was engaged in Paris. This friend facilitated a transfer for my father from Paris to New York. In 1897, when I was 2 years of age, we came to New York and settled like other nationalities did in that period in the quarter that was called the Czech Quarter in Lower New York. Today it is occupied by the New York Hospital. And the tenements that were in this quarter that people lived in have been converted into living quarters by Mayor LaGuardia of New York. In the period of 11 years that we lived in New York, we moved 6 times. We lived in 7 places while I was a small child. This constant changing, having to make new friends, developed a resentment in me identified with change. Today I know we've always had change. I know that we will always have change, but intellectually I still resent change.
Where did you go from New York?
In 1897 until 1900, from 1897 to 1908, we lived in New York. And again, by invitation of H. Liebes and Company, my father was invited to head up the fur department, the same fur department in San Francisco. We moved to San Francisco, and I transferred again from a school with 3 stories of brick building to the condition after the fire in San Francisco. And the little school I had transferred to was a wooden shack on Golden Gate Avenue near Van Ness. The teacher had the 7th and 8th grades in the same room. She would make she would teach, make an assignment, and move over to the next grade while we carried out the assignment. In 1900 and see. After I graduated, I attended girls' high school in San Francisco for 1 year. And the family bought a home in Alameda. I transferred from Girls High to Alameda High School in my sophomore year. The Dean of Girls was assigned by the principal to introduce me to the students in Alameda High School. I graduated in 1913 and entered the University of California at Berkeley. This was at a time when students were not charged any fees to attend the university. The university had a board of regents which took pride in developing what they regard equipment for leaders who could absorb higher education and could become the leaders of the future. I started out majoring in music because I happened to be able to play the piano well enough to be invited to do this, and I buried myself in music in San Francisco. I had the opportunity, for example, to play the piano at the half hour of music in the Greek Theater in Berkeley.
What did you major in at Berkeley?
I transferred from a major in music to the Department of Hygiene. It was an undergraduate Department of Hygiene under Dr. John N. Force. It was also a period when nursing was trying to develop a community nurse and wished the title of her to be public health nurse, while the university felt that the amount of university education was so much more than some of the nurses who were blanketed in as public health nurses had, that it wished to have the title of health visitor. I identified with the university, naturally, and one day Dr. Forrest came to the advanced course in epidemiology and announced to the class, "I'd like those of you who can arrange your schedules to go over to Alameda and take an examination called Health Visitor." I lived in Alameda. I was within walking distance of the City Hall where the examination was to be given. And my parents, particularly my father, thought I should take that examination, which I did. I was then offered the position of health visitor for the city of Alameda.
There. Now you start talking again.
Because I was attending classes in the 5th year, trying to achieve approval for teaching in secondary schools, I felt I should refuse the position. Whereupon the city manager suggested that I come on a part-time basis to Alameda and attend classes to finish the 5th year. This I did. Eventually, I became a full-time health visitor for the city of Alameda. Alameda had a social service board without an office. Its health program consisted of asking the private physicians to see very sick people and asking the person who was employed by the city to divide himself in several directions. He had a private office located 1 block from the city hall. He was health officer for 2 hours every day, other than weekends. He served as first aid physicians in the 2-bed emergency hospital, which was physically attached to the health department quarters. I took the position that, knowing nothing about the real activities that were expected of me, that I would serve whatever I was asked to do. I didn't ask, is it appropriate to one thing or another. I just did it. With the result that in the 9 years that I was affiliated with Alameda, I had a very fortunate background for the future. Incidentally, the title public health nurse won out, and health visitor lost.
Well, Zdenka, today we will be talking more about your shift from the job in Alameda to Los Angeles County. How did that come about? What kind of experiences did you get into? Why not carry on that subject for the time being now? Go ahead.
Interestingly enough, Los Angeles County was engaged in a similar development for improving health service in this county. Dr. John L. Pomeroy was a county health officer. On the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors, there was a man who supported Dr. Pomeroy tremendously and was just as eager as Dr. Pomeroy was to see to it that the wide areas between the cities in Los Angeles County could offer more of a neighborhood service to their people than having to travel, say, from Lancaster on the desert to the little red building in Los Angeles that had an outpatient department. That outpatient department was trying to offer a service to those who simply must come to the hospital, and it was largely an inpatient, outpatient service related to hospital service than anything else. I was hesitant about leaving Los Angeles County because I was so impressed with the wonderful response we received from the general citizenry, which was entirely volunteer, but where people had to go to the doctor's private office if they were very ill for his services. He was glad to serve them rather than trying to develop an institutional type of facility in Alameda. I came to Los Angeles on a leave of absence of 3 months. Interestingly enough, I saw a comparable kind of an attempt here to develop health services, but a completely different philosophy on the part of the community. Aside from the one supervisor, Los Angeles County Supervisor, there was no particular push for developing neighborhood services, and there was an actual hostility in some parts of the county for trying to establish permanent facilities. This surprised me tremendously, and I felt that in the 3 months I was down here, the very best I could do would be to try to change that philosophy. One of the things Dr. Pomeroy asked me to do as a first duty was to see whether I could achieve a better understanding and a better working relationship between the outdoor relief workers of Los Angeles County, who were attached to the Department of Charities, with the public health department that he administered, where he had nurses. Accordingly, in looking around where there might be some positive elements, I would try to choose a district where I felt secure about the local health officer being willing to come along with the project. The health centers down here came about whenever a local city or group of cities wanted a facility in their area. They would grant the county a piece of land if the county of Los Angeles would agree to build a health center. It was interesting psychologically that if there was some degree of success in the place we chose for a demonstration, we could count on somebody else saying, well, why do they have that and we don't? So we moved on to the next health center. Ultimately, the county health department developed a total of 13 districts, each of which was as different from the other as individuals are different from one another. At the same time, there was a strong influence toward our needing a school of social work in Los Angeles County. As this idea developed, and the people from the far east of the United States came here to tell us how to do it, the Welfare Planning Council of Los Angeles, which was the only and single statewide agency at that time, managed to be very helpful. A number of social workers had gone to Sacramento with a bill requesting licensing. The opposition in social work appeared in Sacramento at the time of the hearing and loudly objected. The state legislature said to the two groups, go home and unify your people, and don't come back here until you have one bill to present, and that all social workers of the time will back it.
About what year was that?
I don't know, but it is available in a statement written by Dr. Martha Chickering, who for a time was headed up the Berkeley School, and is available in the Arlene Johnson Library if you ask Miss Britton. You know.
Yeah.
No, I think you're going to be all right
Okay.
this time.
Now go ahead.
Well, let's see where I leave
You
off.
were about the. You were talking about the attempt to license the social workers, and then you were too divided.
There was but one statewide agency in existence, and that was the California Conference of Social Welfare. To this meeting, almost all of the counties in California would send a representative, and the conference offered sections on health and child care and family service and group work, and the intent was to bring the visitor up to date of what had happened since the year before and give them new knowledge. Personally, I am frank to say that I was surprised at the difference that had been developed as to whether Los Angeles would have a single agency in one place located in the Arlene Johnson Library serving the state of the whole, or allowing the centers elsewhere in California without allowing the centers elsewhere in California to develop their own program if they wish to do so.
What sort of program are you talking about?
A program of developing a better health service in their county.
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, it was a period when the nurses in the state were working for a title of public health nurse, while the university undergraduate Department of Hygiene was working for a title called Social Welfare Visitor. However, as the health centers in Los Angeles County grew in number, and Los Angeles County was moving toward establishing a school of social work, the Welfare Planning Council was not as helpful as it had been to Los Angeles. It had been used by agencies whenever a problem arose, that they could go back to their agency and deal with it. But the movement in Los Angeles was toward abolishing the Welfare Planning Council, one aspect of which was to concentrate on welfare program development, and the other half of which was fundraising, and called the Community Chest. Together, they were the Welfare Planning Council. I was invited by Mary Stanton, who became executive of the Welfare Planning Council in Los Angeles County, to join the health division. And I'm frank to say, talked more than ordinarily necessary. At the end of the Welfare Planning Council, I received a chairmanship award. You may have that if you want it.
Good.
And it's signed by Dr. Pulley, who at the time was acting Los Angeles City Health Officer, which is interesting too. But that ends that period.
This was 1945-46.
Well, that's pretty late, you see. As soon as the social workers in Los Angeles County knew that they wanted a school of social work and worked toward that end, the meaning of the Welfare Planning Council decreased in significance. And actually, there was not a strong relationship between the USC school and the Welfare Planning Council up to that point. Also, when the Delta Omega, the undergraduate program of the Berkeley city became a reality, they were working toward moving it out of undergraduate into graduate status and abolishing the Delta Omega undergraduate program. Furthermore, they were not interested in people such as I was, and so they recommended, before this was done, they were not interested in people with a background such as I had, so they recommended that each local community that wished to include some of its people who had made a contribution decide to develop its own chapter. In that way, I became a Delta Omega member through the health center development in Alameda, but I was not welcome in other chapters. And today, the undergraduate program is abolished in Berkeley. It's entirely graduate. And down in Los Angeles County, we have a school of social work. And what else should I say?
We have two schools, UCLA and SC.
Well, I call them social welfare.
No, USC and is a school of social work.
USC is?
Yes.
But not UCLA?
It's social welfare like Berkeley.
That's what I'm saying.
It's a part of the California system, state system.
That's right.
Yes.
I'm really not a member of anything now as far as Delta Omega is concerned.
When during these years that you worked down here, did you decide to go on to get graduate training in social work?
In Los Angeles County, a strike developed among social workers. Dr. Charles Shotland was director of the Jewish Social Service Bureau at the time. He appointed me to represent administration, and the social workers who were eager to develop an appropriate school of social work appointed Helen Hackett. By 1938, we had a serious strike in Los Angeles County among the social workers.
What were they fighting?
they were fighting lack of appropriate help in supervision, and thought the only way they could get it would be to have a school of social work in Los Angeles County. Also, the eastern United States social workers were coming out and were telling us how to do things, spearheaded by Miss Kate McMahon from the National Association of Medical Social Workers. It wasn't long before I decided that I could not continue as a leader of staff, which on the one hand I was expecting to have degrees in social work and didn't have one myself. Dr. Dickey was the director of public health in the state, and I knew that the state had money to send a social worker to school if they wished to do so, to learn to be a professional social worker, financed by this money, state money. I visited Dr. Dickey and asked if I might have access to this money, and he said no. His reason being that it was intended for state people only, and did not go so far as to make it available to county people. I then mortgaged our family home in San Mateo County, and on that borrowed money I went to school at my own expense.
Where?
At the University of Chicago, when Edith Abbott was the dean. Edith and Grace Abbott both were participants in their project, and my substitute locally was good enough to speak to Grace Abbott about being nice to me. And bless her heart, she herself became ill, was hospitalized, but she saw to it that when I got to Chicago that I received a ticket to attend the luncheon meeting of their Welfare Planning Council. Helen Wright was my advisor.
How long were you there? 1 year?
I was in I was assigned to the Michael Reese Hospital fieldwork unit, financed by the University of Chicago, and subject to its supervision and administration, and had 3 units of psychiatric social work, at the end of which the supervisor recommended me to the American Association of Psychiatric Social Workers as a junior worker. I served under 5 health officers who again were as different from one another as individuals are different from one another, and who participated fully or not according to their interests, who were usually also in private practice and gave but part-time service to the health department. On the staff, there developed an attitude of the administrator in the central office not setting up a program that was more acceptable to some of the workers in the district. They developed a division among themselves. They just knew it could be done if I had what it takes to do it.
Now you're still talking about Michael Reese Hospital?
No, I'm back in Los Angeles.
Oh, I didn't know you'd come back. I asked what year you got your degree.
That's what I can't, it was either 41 or 42.
Well, that's...
But you see, that was far along toward establishing a school of social work.
Yes, I know.
I returned to Los Angeles County because
You got your master's?
and got a master's degree.
Yeah.
After I received my master's degree, but did not receive it for over a year afterwards. So that I was did I say we had a line and staff organization in Los Angeles County?
No, I don't remember that. When you came back, what position did you come back to?
My old position.
Which was called what?
Which was director of medical social, public health social work. I'm not sure, but that we did that later. We might have done the public health social work later. But I returned to my old position. And the health officer, the county health officer at the time, was under a threat of the county. In Los Angeles County, there were several major changes in that the head of civil service, when I left, having full responsibility for developing classification definitions, also allocating the salary to that classification, lost the responsibility of allocating salaries, and they were transferred to a new position of central administrative officer, CAO. Annually, in Los Angeles, the health department's business manager, with whom I worked very closely, always gave me an opportunity to sit in on the interviews with the representative of the CAO. And invariably, when that man returned to his staff meeting, they changed him the following year. This kept up on and on, but the staff could not understand that. And I did not wish to share certain things with staff and threaten them. And I overtly allowed them to give me a salary which was very little above what the district worker was allocated, because I wanted degree people in the district, and I wanted them to be strong enough professionally to be able to manage any aspect that was needed in the given district. But I did manage to do some transferring if it didn't work when I first placed them. I was fully responsible for the selection of the worker and the placement of the worker, and to see that she performed. And the county health officer, as long as he was Dr. Pomeroy, almost invariably took...
Go ahead. Go on. Okay.
Did I say we had a line and staff organization?
Yes, but you didn't say you worked under how many health officers?
One to each district.
Well, we'll talk to that.
Of the 5 health officers under which I served in Los Angeles County, it seemed to me that the one that we would regard the most social-minded was Dr. Pomeroy. Go back to Alameda. He was influenced by the secretary of the Tuberculosis and Health Association in Los Angeles County, who later became Mrs. Pomeroy, who took him to a meeting where a social worker discussed service to the social aspects of a tuberculosis case. He was so impressed with the importance of including the skills of a social worker at the time of diagnosis of tuberculosis that he proceeded to see to it that we got such people added in each of the districts. The CAO fought Dr. Pomeroy. How do I know? I sat on the opposite side of the desk when he was talking to Dr. Pomeroy, to Dr. Gilbert, and told him if he allowed me to go about to the degree I was going about in the community, I would not get a raise in salary. I did not mind.
What did Dr. Pomeroy do with that?
Oh, he was gone by then.
Oh, I
There
thought
were
you...
5 health officers.
Well, I thought you...
Beginning with Dr. Pomeroy.
Well,
He was the one who brought me.
yes, I know. I just thought you'd said that Dr. Pomeroy had been one of the great ones, and that I understood you to say that he and another health officer met, but it must have been you and the other health officer who told you that you couldn't get around as fast.
No.
I'm not clear on what you were saying there.
What I was trying to say is of the 5 health officers, from my point of view, Dr. Pomeroy was the most social-minded.
That's right, yes. But who had the responsibility for cutting down your activities? That you...
The CAO.
And
Not I.
No,
it was
of
taken
course.
away from Mr. Amsden, given to the CAO, which was a new service. And the best our department could do would be to include me in the conference between the CAO and the person who represented the function in the central office. The local health officer did not participate with us. Apparently, the local health officer had to work with the business manager. And every time that the representative of the CAO's office identified with us and was willing to support our program, he was changed to another man. By the USC School of, what was John Fiftner the head of? What did they call it?
Can't recall now.
You people didn't know your university either. You had this very strong service knocking in daylights out of things.
I don't recall. Well, how...
I told you that what prompted me to go back to school and on my own money
I know.
was the fact that the staff was having degrees by then.
Yes, that's right, and you needed one too.
And I needed one if I was going to continue as the head.
Well, now, how much longer did you continue as the head?
I retired in October 1961.
And you certainly lived through a lot of changes and philosophy in social work, philosophy in other professions.
Always spoke for standards, no matter what it did. Always. I stood for standards as much as anything I did. And hoped that, I remember once when we had a meeting with the local district health officer, local district BPA director, and my worker and he were not getting along at all. And she was the kind of person, she'd go back, you're not taking this.
No. Yes. It's on.
Oh, well, turn it off.
Well, Zdenka, today we're going to finish our recording of your experiences during the long period of time you were in social work. And I'm going to let you decide what you want to recall and tell us about as you approach this final session. So go ahead and say what you want to say.
Thank you. When I transferred from Alameda to Los Angeles, I transferred from an island 4 miles long and 1 mile wide to a metropolitan area that of itself had organized to meet its needs. One of the largest cities in the United States, with an area of between 3,000 and 4,000 square miles, and one that had developed its own organization to meet its local Los Angeles County needs.
Now you can go on. Go ahead.
In Los Angeles, there were 4 health departments: Los Angeles County, Los Angeles City, Pasadena, and Long Beach. The Board of Supervisors had the general reputation of being the true authority for public health service in the county. Los Angeles City had a council, but it took the position that since the Board of Supervisors had the authority and the county health officer was an aggressive person, that he should administer the program of community health control. Long Beach wasn't interested in us at all. Pasadena would not speak to us. Its health officer was a bacteriologist. And when he wanted to refer anyone who he thought was acutely ill, he referred them to the Pasadena dispensary, which in effect served Pasadena as our county hospital served Los Angeles. Los Angeles County government had certain institutions. The Los Angeles little red brick building on Mission Road was the hospital for the acutely ill. However, its clinics were limited to preparing a person for hospitalization or follow-up after hospitalization. That department overtly did not wish to take on the administration of a medical care for the ambulatory patient. I was present and heard the director of the county hospital say so. The other institutions the county had were olive view of a kind for the patient who in the diagnostic clinic of the health department reflected an antagonistic attitude of the kind that we knew he needed some help in understanding how infectious he was to other people. He was the kind of patient that might have been sent to Olive View for this kind of a lesson. They also had Rancho Las Amigas, which I recall included very elderly women whom the state hospital refused to accept for state hospitalization because they felt they did not belong in a state hospital. At Rancho Las Amigas, there was a psychiatric unit with a doctor in charge who had had some background in psychiatry, and he worked equally with Pacific Colony or with the Metropolitan Hospital with some of the women that either were feeble-minded or psychotic. When Dr. Pomeroy opened the first health center in San Fernando, the community situation included having one railroad bring Mexican people from Mexico to California to help California with cheap labor for working in agriculture. The theory was that they would send them back home when the job was done. Reality was that they met a girl, she was pregnant before they left, the baby was born in the United States, the baby became a citizen of the United States. This went on for years and years and years. It was pointed out by our service, by my service, and they did a very fine listening service, but the practice went on just the same. Eventually, the County Board of Supervisors said to Dr. Pomeroy, "You know what is needed. You have the ability to run the clinics that are needed for the care of ambulatory patients. You take on the responsibility for doing that in the county health centers that are about to spread throughout this county." he accepted the responsibility. He went to the County Medical Association and asked them if they would be willing to man those clinics. They said they would, provided he would apply a system of determining who is eligible for county clinic care. He agreed to this, and I was told we would have to do that or lose the program. I eventually decided to find out what my own colleagues meant when they were talking about our determining eligibility. And I went to one of the private hospitals and found out that their notion of eligibility was purely a clerical service, whereas the county health medical social worker accepted the applicant as if he were applying for aid in a private social agency. Listened to him, heard the problem, and the budget for the family was an incidental question in the total inquiry. That seemed sound to me in terms of keeping faith with organized medicine, but my social workers never forgave me for accepting eligibility as a valid role for the county health medical social workers. From 1927 to about 1932, it is, of course, 60 years since I thought about this, all went well. And then the beginnings of a depression started, but no one diagnosed it as the beginnings of a depression. Organized medicine decided that the reason people came to the county health clinics was because they were there. They were not identified as a charity. They were identified as something available to the public without their paying for the service. And County Medical Association pushed for transferring the clinic program from the jurisdiction of the county health officer to the jurisdiction of the county charities department. During that early period, when I first came, Dr. Pomeroy said to me, our nurses and county health, the county charities social workers are not getting along. They do not plan jointly, and something needs to be done about that. So I regarded that as a first opportunity to see what I could do. We had meetings. I had no way of knowing to the degree to which this was helpful until one day the superintendent of charities came over to the health department with a visitor and introduced me as the oil that makes the wheels go round. This told me that in the districts there were places where they did get together. For example, in Alhambra, Mrs. Myrna Silver was the social worker. When they felt that there should be a change of plan for a patient, they held a conference. She called a conference, and the clinician who examined the patient and diagnosed the tuberculosis, plus herself, plus the county outdoor relief worker, they were called outdoor relief rather than public assistance workers, got together. And the team decided what is the best thing to do, and the clinician went along with them, and things worked beautifully. One needs to know the distances between the health center buildings themselves throughout the county to appreciate that they are as different from each other as individuals are different from one another. There was no such thing as everybody doing things the same way. I felt my responsibility in the department was to find the proper person for the given district and its needs. And if it didn't work, then to make a move about it. In Los Angeles, there was a welfare planning council, well established. One part of it related to agencies, programs, the other was the community chest. The welfare planning side invited agencies to apply for membership if they expected to receive money from the community chest. And if they were accepted, then annually that agency executive came to a budget committee of the Welfare Planning Council and presented his or her budget. They never were given what they needed. It wasn't available. And they were expected to go out and raise additional money for whatever it was they could do. And the chest thought that by their having to go out and do that, that they were helping in raising the amount of money the chest could raise. The private agencies in Los Angeles followed a religious pattern. There was a Catholic Welfare Bureau and a Jewish Social Service Bureau and a Family Service of Los Angeles and an Assistance League. The theory was that you went to the agency to apply for aid according to your religion. If you didn't happen to belong to any particular religious organization, perhaps, and the county refused you, perhaps you did not get aid. I don't know what happened to some of those people. But I will say that the Assistance League was liberal, and that occasionally the Jewish Social Service Bureau became liberal about helping a person who was wandering around trying to get some assistance. I was invited to join the Welfare Planning Council Health Division, and it had 4 divisions: health, family, children's, and group work. 2 circumstances come to mind, which to my mind were exceedingly helpful. One was that we were able to appoint a committee composed of a prominent physician, a hospital administrator, and a medical social worker to visit an unattached clinic and on the one hand evaluate whether their service was truly helpful, and on the other to evaluate whether they knew that it would be far better service if they became attached to a hospital as a hospital outpatient department. For example, the Santa Rita Clinic joined Queen of Angels. To me, that was a helpful addition in community service. The other one that comes to mind was that there seemed to be a pattern of appointing a dissatisfied nurse to becoming the social worker for the hospital. And we were able to point out to them that there were social workers who at least had a good social work experience, if nothing else, that should be appointed rather than the pattern they were using. And that was a helpful experience. I feel that the Health Division Act of the Welfare Planning Council actually was contributing to improvement of the program to the public in the Los Angeles County community. At the University of Southern California, there was a sociology department of which Dr. Emery Bogardus was head. Miss Kate McMahon, who was a field representative of the American Association of Medical Social Workers, would come to Los Angeles, visit the university, worked well with Dr. Bogardus, who supported her principles, and worked toward trying to get USC to develop some courses, if not a formal program for social work. This ended with the coming of Arlene Johnson to head up the Graduate School of Social Work. When the clinics were transferred from the Health Department administration to county charities, the depression was understood by everybody in Los Angeles. Toward the end of the 30s and following a social workers' strike, when they actually walked the streets protesting an agency's practice, I decided that if I was going to employ social workers with degrees in the districts, that I myself would have to have a degree if I continued as the head of the service. Having related to Miss McMahon as much as I did, and she always came to see me, and she kept reassuring me that I said nothing that was contrary to good social work, I decided to go to Chicago. That would be a new experience for me, and apparently they thought so too, because they placed me in the Michael Reese Hospital University unit, which the university financed, for 3 quarters. I had the security of being able to return to my job in the health department. I just knew I could come back, and I was on a leave of absence. Another factor that happened while I was in Chicago was that while the head of county civil service, Mr. Clifford Amsden, had the responsibility not only for defining a classification for the agencies, but allocating the salary that belonged to that classification, was deprived of being allowed to dictate the salary. That responsibility was transferred to the chief administrative officer of the county. To me, these young men that came from the USC School of Public Administration knew absolutely nothing about the ingredients of any program that they related to. But they were in charge. And I also noticed that though my own health department personnel man, who was responsible for preparing the budget for the rest of the department to consider, though he always invited me to be a part of that conference, and I felt that I sold one of those men from SC, Next year he was changed for another man, and I would start interpreting all over again. I was willing to interpret, and apparently I had enough aggression not to be stopped when people wanted to stop me. I appreciated 20 years of community service, both in Little Alameda and in complex, enormous Los Angeles, and would not exchange it for anything. By the grace of fate, I happened to come along at the right time. Nothing but fate helped me. It was an accident that I came along when I did. I was in the 1917 class at the university when our men stood on the steps of North Hall to say goodbye to go to war. But in 1918, the war was already ended, and I participated in the first Armistice Day. But I remember distinctly what I was doing. We had an influenza epidemic, and I was in homes trying to find volunteers to be willing to come nurse the people that could not get into a hospital in their homes. I went to school on my own money. The United States Children's Bureau was able to arrange I don't know whether it was a fellowship or what, but support for a state medical social worker to come to Chicago for an experience. If you were with the state, you could get the money. But I was with the county, and they would not do anything about the county. So I mortgaged a home, was without salary for 1 year, and was glad that I did it that way in the end. I never regretted doing it that way. When I came back from Chicago, the SC school was already, now let me see, no, I'm wrong. I left Chicago, I got my degree, my master's degree, in 1941. And I think that the SC school was either just opening or had just begun with Arlene Johnson as the dean. I was interested in the fact that because I had the degree, I was invited to participate in programs that actually benefited if you did have psychiatric social field work. For example, there was a state agency, I can't recall the name, the California State, the California Social Welfare Agency, which experienced an unfortunate circumstance when qualified or social workers who felt qualified by virtue of their experience developed a bill and went to Sacramento and tried to get it passed. The other social workers, who probably were members of the survey club at the time, you either were moving toward professional, or you were in the survey club serving the agencies as a social worker, appeared in Sacramento and scotched the possibility of that first group of of strong social workers getting their legislation. They were told to go home and clarify their own thinking as social workers and not return until social work of the whole would back whatever bill was presented in Sacramento. At that point, the California Association for Social Welfare appointed a committee to study the whole question of licensing, and I had the privilege of being appointed to that very first committee. I also had the privilege of being asked to come to Washington to be a member of a committee of consultants nationwide when circumstances in state programs became a problem to Washington. For example, there was a time when child welfare workers and medical social workers on the same cases relating to crippled children couldn't decide whose responsibility was what. So the Children's Bureau in Chicago, in Washington, appointed a committee of consultants, which they drew from the country of the whole, to try to clarify this division of thinking and bring those two groups together on some agreement. I also had the privilege of being invited to join the tuberculosis division of the Public Health Service when Dr. Herman Hillebo was chairman of the tuberculosis division. And that assignment, in 1 week, was this. In 1 week, while he was on a field trip, we were to decide just what the medical social worker as such can contribute to each phase of the tuberculosis control program. I never worked a group of people more than that poor group took with good nature. We would meet in the morning, and we would stop for lunch and for dinner, and after dinner we would meet again, and sometimes we were there at midnight, but they came in the morning, and at the end of that week we had a program to give him, and I think he was satisfied. Perhaps because Los Angeles County actually is not understood by all segments of social work practice, because it's too big and they don't get to see each other enough. But I have always felt that there needs to be a closer relationship between the University of Southern California School of Social Work and the agencies. Today, I am satisfied with the fact that we now have recognized that a profession that is truly a profession must be identified with higher learning, must be identified with a university. I am satisfied that social work must be one of those professions. I am satisfied that because the school is there now, that we have better programs in the field. And I believe that social work today is a far better contribution than anything has ever been before. But I do not regret my 43 years of experience. I will always remember Professor Charles Reber when his first lecture in logic was around the phrase, "When in doubt, don't." Today we have named some facility out at UCLA after Professor Reber. I was very fortunate to have come along when I could get a university education for the asking. We had no fees for the students. We had a board of regents that took pride in the fact that there would be no fees because they considered that higher learning of the university contributes the future leaders of the community. If I were asked what qualities a candidate who is considering whether or not to go into social work should have, I would include capacity to interpret what you can offer clearly so that the lay people on your committee can understand and can themselves transfer that information to others. I do not believe that high-sounding language and catchwords are going to sell social work. I think it's going to continue to be a service that meets a need, but how it meets it and who meets it is going to be different in the future if we have graduates from a school of social work. I also think they must have integrity, and I also think they must be people who of themselves know that they have a pretty good sense of judgment. It seems to me that the quality of judgment is very important in the practice of social work. You need to know when to stop pushing and come back to it later. You need to be sure your opponent understands. You need to be sure that you understand him before you start giving your wares. Well, bless you all for the future.
Well, thank you very much, Zdenka. Fine, it's just great, and I'm so happy that we had this very good summary of your experience, and I'm sure others will appreciate it too.
Excellent.